A salary is the drug they give you when they want you to forget about your dreams.
Welcome to the Corporate Dropout Podcast. I'm your host, Alacia Citro. After a successful career in tech, suffering from burnout, stress, and anxiety, I walked away from a multiple six-figure career to chase my passions and purpose as a coach and entrepreneur. This show is going to inspire, equip, and empower you to do the same. Let's get it. As a former Salesforce employee, I can tell you with confidence that every successful business uses a CRM tool. Why should yours be any different? Whether you're an entrepreneur, network marketer, or realtor, you need a way to keep track of your outreach to team members, prospects, and customers. Enter the 90-Day Habits Journal. Created by top network marketing leaders, the 90-Day Cycle to New Habits Journal is a great way to cultivate a winning mindset each day and track your activity. What you track grows, so start tracking what matters in your life and business. Get your copy at 90dayhabits.co and use code CITRO, that's CITRO, for 10% off. Hello, friends. Today, I am interviewing Shannon Hughes, fellow corporate dropout. Today, Shannon helps leaders ignite the genius of their people and culture with applied improv and play, and she is an experienced facilitator in this field. Shannon, thank you so much for coming on the show. I can't wait for the interview.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Well, we connected a few weeks ago and just instantly vibed and shared a bunch of book recommendations and affirmation card decks, which I ordered and all that fun stuff. So I'm excited to see where today's conversation goes. I'm sure it will be interesting to say the least.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Since we talked, I've kept reading all my Enneagram books and keep brushing up on my Enneagram 7 skill set and figuring all that stuff out. So that was awesome. Kept me going.
I feel like anyone who's listening to that's into the Enneagram will want to know what we are now. So you're a 7. What's your wing?
You know what? I was just reading about that this morning. I wasn't sure. And I think I'm a 6. Which I was surprised to read because I would have thought a 6. And again, I know enough about the Enneagram, like to be dangerous, quote unquote. So I'm not an expert. Yeah, I don't know. I was surprised about the 6 because I don't really see myself as being someone who's kind of, future oriented in terms of being nervous or worried about, what might happen. However, I also don't identify with an 8. So 6 it is, at least until I read more and change my mind.
Yeah, I need to dive in deeper too to see if I am thinking I could be maybe something different. So I'm an 8. I don't know which wing is stronger. Maybe the 7. I really have a pretty strong, spontaneous, free spirit streak. But then I also really identify with the 3. I know I'm an 8 because my greatest fear is being controlled more so than the 3. So anyway, so not to go on a tangent, but it's fascinating. And people who aren't into it are like, okay, get to the point, let's start the interview. But people who love the Enneagram are probably enjoying this. So anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, I love starting every interview with the high level overview of your career path, because any entrepreneur I've met usually has a pretty interesting and sometimes twisted path to getting to that point. So what's your story? Take us through college to today and how you got here.
Yeah. It's a great question. And it's funny because I actually, I did a stand-up, or not, it wasn't really a stand-up. It's more like a autobiographical 20-minute kind of solo show about this. And I called it Yes And, because that's ultimately where I landed. Growing up, I'm an only child. So a lot of my, time keeping myself busy was creating performances and making things up and writing and performing and doing shows. And so it's sort of always been in my blood to perform or just to enjoy that. So that's just kind of the backdrop, just as for context. I worked for the same company for a long time. I worked for a recruitment advertising agency. So basically B2B marketing and advertising, brand strategy, that sort of thing. And I was there for a lot of years with 1 year, or I guess it was a year and a half, 2 years off to work for another company. But anyway, I was there for a long time. Great company, great people. And when my kids were small, they were small. They were small enough to need me more than they do now. And I approached my boss and I said, I don't know. I mean, these 60-hour work weeks with me, having conference calls on the sideline of the soccer field at, God knows what hour of the day. This isn't working for me. And I was actually prepared to leave. That was my resignation speech. Like I was done. And he said, no, we know he's got a bunch of kids and whatever. We just talked about it and we were good friends. And he said, well, hold on. You're an asset to the company. I don't want to see you leave. Like this might not be what's in the cards for you. Why don't you take this other role? Because at the time I was a VP of client strategy. So I was in front of clients. I was building strategies. I was doing all the discovery. I was flying all over the place. I was leading pitch meetings. So like performance, like all performance, right? And meeting with people and just being around that energy all the time, which was just totally lit me up. And the job that he offered me, Alicia, was financial operations manager. And you can already see where the story is going, but ultimately it worked. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was like living, breathing, sleeping Salesforce, and just chasing people around to like fill in the spreadsheet the right way. And, just numbers. And anyway, yeah. And harassing people for like, well, why haven't you made the blah, 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 and the goals and the this and that. And so it totally fit the bill for the time, right? Because my kids were small and I was working from home. And then it just wasn't working for me anymore. And I just started going, oh my God, this is soul sucking. I can't do this. And I started having conversations with my husband about leaving and what that might look like for our family and that sort of thing. And while I was doing that, and this is where the story gets a little more interesting, is I went back to improv classes. So there's a school here in San Francisco Bay Area called Bay Area Theater Sports, BATS for short. And I took classes. I just thought, well, God, I used to take improv in high school. Like, I love this stuff. And I don't know. I wonder what's there. I wonder what it might be like to go back into that whole community. And talk about yes and. It was like, I did that. And then that opened up a door to joining a women's co-working space in my neighborhood. And then that opened up creative writing. And I was submitting pieces of writing that I'd never done that before. And it was just like the onion. I just kept peeling back pieces of the onion by saying yes to all these things. And my husband and I kind of made it work. And in 2018, I gave my final declaration that I was leaving the organization. And I dropped out. I dropped out. Yeah. And I've never looked back. I've never looked back.
I feel like most don't, unless they decide, it's just a little too much risk for me. But I don't think that people wired that way jump into entrepreneurship and then go back. So talk to me a little bit too. Like, what was I hate even using the word plan, because I think you should have some semblance of a plan before you drop out, or, you could get into maybe a painful situation financially or otherwise. But did you do anything to sort of do that exit strategy, whether it was, putting aside a savings account or ramping up a side business? Like, what did that look like for you before you left the nest?
Yeah, good question. Savings account, yes. Side hustle, no. I did kind of have this quasi plan that was, so I do voice acting as well. And so I was actively taking a bunch of classes at the time. And I thought, well, wow, what if I could make that my side hustle? And I could get some gigs and maybe I get an agent, maybe I get some income coming in that way, enough to kind of help support me through this journey of entrepreneurship. And that's just been a longer journey than I had expected. And it's a story for another day, but that was part of it. At least the planning part, even though it didn't necessarily come into a huge income generator. To be perfectly honest, and I know this may come across as coming from a place of privilege. So I'm saying this at the risk of that. Yes, we were smart with our finances. Yes, we had lots of very honest conversations about what would need to shift in terms of how we spent our money. And my husband, thank God, is and was then in a really great, had a great position, a sales position at a software company. And to this day, I just run out of words when I talk about, the gratitude that I still have for him, just kind of saying, look, you're not happy. Let's see what we can do. We'll have to cut. We'll have to make some sacrifices, and let's try to make that work, at least for the duration, between whatever that was, spring of 2018 until at least the end of that year. And thankfully, that year was when I started to pull in little itty bitty bits of income and seeing a little bit of traction. So the stars aligned. But you're right. This is and can be even more so a really, an uphill battle, because this is not something that's just, oh yeah, let's just quit our job and go and try to go back into theater for the sake of it. Like that's not a thing. So there are lots of considerations that need to go into it for sure.
I'm noticing too, the more people I talk to that are wanting to leave their jobs or already have, there's so many ways, for lack of a better term, so many ways to skin a cat, right? I was talking to someone yesterday who was like, I hate what I'm doing so much that I'm going to become an Instacart delivery person to start making money on the side so I can leave and then work on the thing that I really want to do. So, we're so lucky now to be in the age of the internet too, where there's all like the gig economy, right? There's so many things that you can do to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit. But I did want to acknowledge too, like, thank you for saying the privilege piece. I don't talk about that enough. And actually, since you and I met, a crazy thing happened. My social media coach, who I interviewed on the podcast, she was the second guest, Harley Jordan. Great episode, by the way. Our final meeting. So we'd been working together for 3 months. Our final meeting, she forces me to record a TikTok video telling my corporate dropout story. And so it was like a multiple part thing. So I did it 3 parts. This thing, I post it and I forget about it. It ends up going viral, Shannon. One of these videos is at over 600,000 views at time of recording. I went from like 20 followers on TikTok to like 5,500. It's insane. That's a conversation for another day. But here was the thing that kept coming up. People on TikTok are savage. Like Instagram, people are a lot more like buttoned up and polite. Not all the time. But on TikTok, they just tell you what they think. And so what kept coming up was, you are so privileged. And I said, you know what? I didn't call that out, but I know I am. So to the listener who's single and doesn't have the safety net in terms of the spouse with a stable job, you can drop out too. It's probably just going to take a bit more planning and it might be a longer process, but you can absolutely still do it.
Totally. Thank you for sharing that. And now I have to go watch that. Well, I don't know if it's still even available to go see, but I feel inspired.
It's still on. Yeah, TikTok is fun. You would love TikTok, by the way. You do the improv, the performance thing, you'd be all about it. But anyway, conversation for another day.
Totally. Yep. It got me thinking too. I don't remember if it was in her book, Big Magic, or if it was on a podcast or whatever, but Elizabeth Gilbert speaks to this. And she says, and she speaks to exactly that kind of archetype or profile that you're describing, where somebody goes, well, geez, of course she can do it. I can't do it though, because whatever, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Gilbert has spoken about just the easy, and well, I don't want to say that word. That's kind of taboo in this conversation around privilege, but she talks about she invites specifically women. What if every week you put 75 cents into a jar? Every week you put 75 cents into a jar. What if you usually grab a Starbucks and you don't, and you put that money into a jar? So like, what are those? And those are just silly examples, but because we all, to some degree, we all have loose change somewhere, or we've got, somebody at the grocery store that got the change falls out of that little machine and we stick it in our bag and it rolls around. Well, what if we put that into a jar? And so again, I love Elizabeth Gilbert, so I could go on, but and I'm just trying to really be careful here about that privilege conversation. And what if you just took those pennies and those nickels and put them in a jar? Like, imagine what would happen over 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. You're going to have hundreds of dollars. And might you be able to use that for a coach? Might you be able to use that for a savings? Or, there's 1,000 things that you might be able to spend that money on to try to unhitch yourself from, or, take off those golden handcuffs and find your own path.
I love that so much. Thank you for saying this. So there's 2 things that you made me think of, and then we'll move on to the next question. But there was a saying at Salesforce when I was first working there. We would get, it could be, either a very strategic deal cycle or it could be transactional. And what would happen often, companies grow, they need more Salesforce seats. So you would get these like onesie, twosie, things hitting the dashboard all day. And sometimes it might be like $300. And there was a guy on my team. I now say this all the time, that shavings make a pile. So like the little things that you feel like are making no difference, like shavings make a pile. And then the final thing, like I invite anyone listening to read the book, The Slight Edge. He talks about these like tiny, minute things that you can do. Yeah. The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. These tiny little actions compounded over time end up making huge results and compounding. And he talks about, there's a parable of these twin sons at their father's deathbed. And the dad gives them the option of $1 million cash or a penny in a bag that doubles every day until they touch it. And I won't give it away, but you'd be surprised who ended up with a lot more money by the end of it, all because of the power of compounding. So anyway, thank you for calling that out. That's a wonderful, I think a wonderful lesson.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wrote that down, which I just added to my list of Alacia suggestions for things to read and learn.
I honestly should open up like a library or something or a bookshop because I'm just obsessed. So anyway, back to you though. So take us up to present day. You found Enlivened Studios. Now it's been 2.5 years. Tell us about how you went about creating that, what you do. Like give us the scoop.
Yeah. So when I went back and started taking improv classes again at BATS, it was immediately evident to me that so a lot of people think that improv doesn't have any structure, right? Well, it's made up. So how could it possibly have structure? When in fact, it is highly structured and highly nuanced, and it takes a lot of practice, right? I mean, you think, and maybe that does sound evident to some of your users, but other people are like, what? I mean, you just make it up. It's not a big deal. And so I bring that up because when you do take improv classes or practice it in any way, yes, and I'm sure is something, at least for most people, is kind of the most obvious or most highly used tenet of improv. But there are, and by the way, yes, and just for those people who don't know what it means, it's a way for two people. Let's just take the staged performance as kind of an example. And you can obviously apply this to life, which is what I do. If you've got two actors on a stage and one actor says to the other actor, hey, mom, oh man, the kitchen smells amazing. What are you baking? Now, the other person on the stage has now been endowed certain characteristics. Okay. I'm a mom. I'm obviously home because I'm baking something, and I am baking something. So now I know where I am. I know who I am, and I know what I'm doing. And so you've just given me like 3 very important gifts that I can work with. And so what I do is I receive those gifts and I build on them. So I say, yes, I am the mom. I am in the kitchen. I am baking something. And then I might build on it and reply to you or give you a taste of what I'm baking or whatever it is. And so I just want to be clear about that, because sometimes people think yes means agreeing, and that's not always the case. It's more about acceptance and receiving. Anyway, that's just one, but there are so many others, like make your partner look good is another tenet of improv. Play the scene you're in, not the scene you want to be in.
That applies to life, doesn't it?
that's like mindfulness 101, right? I mean, practicing presence. Yep. So here we are, we're playing, we're doing all these things, we're on stage, we're creating these scenes, and we're practicing these things. And I went, oh my God, this is not just a performance thing. This is a life practice. And having just come out of corporate, or at the time I was in the midst of leaving, I mean, I call it kind of, I got air quotes, like the white space of opportunity for how many areas of improvement there are, let's just say, in the corporate environment for bringing some of these practices and skills in, right? I know your listeners know that. So yeah, it's all about listening and presence and acceptance and just all the goodness that is applied, that then became applied improv. So I put these things together, and I mean, I didn't actually think I was the only person that realized this, because I'm not I know I'm not the center of the universe. So, but there was a moment where I'm like, wow, I'm really onto something. And then I picked up like 1,000 books and went on 1,000 websites and realized, oh, there's like an industry for this. There are, this is a global practice. People are using applied improv in healthcare, to support people dealing with PTSD, to work with, to work in a kind of a trauma informed environment, in education, dealing with people who have Alzheimer's and supporting the caregivers who take care of people with Alzheimer's. So, law enforcement, there's a whole body of work where people are using improv to help underserved communities communicate in a way that is generative and helpful with law enforcement. So, so although I thought I was like, wow, look at me, I figured all this out, and I went, oh, awesome! I'm actually part of a huge community of people who do this for a living, and so
cool, though.
It was, yeah, exactly, yes, because there's so much power in the collective. And knowing that I had this whole global sphere of people that were all doing this, just, it just opened up so many doors of who I could talk to and who I could learn from and what I could read. And then I just kind of started to put my own practice together around it. And the Enlivened Studios, I don't remember which came first. It was like a chicken and an egg thing, but there's a Howard Thurman quote. I can't remember if you and I talked about this last time, but there's a Howard Thurman quote that goes like this: don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and then go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to touch on one thing too, that I think just deserves like the double underline highlight. You think you have this idea that no one else has thought of. You come to find out that's not the case, but you did it anyway. I think that there are so many people who have a great idea and then they find out someone else is doing it, and so they don't do it. I look at it already being out in the world as a good thing because it shows there's a viable market for it, right? And that you don't need to like create a new one and like do a ton of education around that. And then to just know, like, to the point of the quote you just shared, you're going to go about sharing it in a way that is unique and that is needed by someone on the receiving end, because I think so much of it is just energy, right? I'm sure I'm not the only person that has a podcast about quitting your job and like what you can do as an entrepreneur, but the people that listen to it, maybe they hear me say it and it resonates, whereas on another podcast, it didn't, and vice versa, right? So I just wanted to highlight that. I think it's so important to do it anyway if it makes you come alive, even if there's already people in the space.
1,000%. 1,000%. I had a friend of mine when I was first kind of embarking on this who does a variation of this. She's more of a performer than a practitioner in business environments or whatever. And I said that to her, basically. I was like, well, who am I? All the self-doubt and like, well, who am I to come in here and think that I can flex my muscles and make a space for myself when everybody else is already doing this? And she goes, oh, I'm sorry. So there's only one pizza place allowed in this entire county? So there's only one. We're only allowed to have one grocery store? Oh, okay. Sorry. We should probably ask all the other grocery stores and all the other pizza places to leave the market because there's only allowed to be one. No, that's my favorite pizza place. And that's your favorite. The other one's your favorite pizza place. And that is what, first of all, that's what having an open market is, speaking of pizza and stores and stuff. But also to your point, like I am Shannon and I'm going to Shannonize or whatever the silly way of saying that is. I'm going to bring my own, I'm going to bring my own like flavor to it. And it might resemble something else, but so what? And to your point too, and I'm sure you see this showing up in your work, is sometimes when you hold space, whether it be a class or a course or potentially even a podcast, and you say something a second time, like, oh God, I'm doing this thing again, or I've already used this exercise. It's going to resonate even if it's the same person in the same workshop, it's going to resonate a different way the second time you say it than it did the first, because that person is in a different energetic space. Today is Tuesday. The last time you did it was Friday. You know, I was in a good mood today. I was in a bad mood last Friday. Whatever it is, like, none of those things should prohibit us from continuing to try new things and repeat what works for the sake of it potentially landing differently. And, and to give us the opportunity to continue to refine it and learn from our own experiences too.
So you just made me think of something else too. So have you been to Italy before?
Yes, it's been a long time, but yes.
It's been kind of a long time for us too. The last time I was there was on our honeymoon. So like a little over 6 years ago. So part of where we honeymooned, we went to Rome, Amalfi Coast, and Florence. When we were in Amalfi Coast, we went on this, it's like a tourist attraction. I can't even remember the name of it, but it's not the Blue Grotto. It's a different one. I think it's like the Green Grotto or something. I'm probably botching this, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, we get in there and, I'm half Italian. So is my husband. Italian. Like right now I'm talking with my hands. Like we're kind of like natural born performers to an extent. And the guy that was like, maneuvering our little rowboat through this grotto and like, giving the spiel, he was so into it. And I said to my husband, I said to Jeff, I'm like, can you imagine how many times a day this guy does that? I felt like it was the first time because he was that excited about it and that into it. So I think that's part of it too. And why you need to go into something you're super passionate about, because like you're going to have to keep saying the same thing over and over and over again and stay in the same space. So like do something that you can always be that enthusiastic about, because maybe someone's hearing it for the first time and like you need to be bringing the heat every time. Right.
Love it. Love it. And great analogy. Totally.
Okay. So talk to me about ramping up Enlivened. Like how long did it take for you to get clients? Like what was it like building this business? Because this was your first business that you've started, right?
Yes. Yeah. And
what was that learning curve like?
Oh God, it's still a learning curve.
Yeah, good answer. Here are we kidding?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was, so it was a slow ramp because it took me, I left my job in March 2018. That year was sort of my exploratory, like, what is this? What's going on? How does all this piece together? What is it going to look like? And then 2019, I kind of like, I started putting pen to paper and kind of, sort out what this might be. And again, it was a lot of like coffee chats with people and trying to figure out who did it in which ways and all the books and all the things. And thankfully I was part of this women's co-working group too, because it was just this amazing supportive group. And you could host workshops in there and just try things out, super low stakes, like nobody was paying for it, so you could try. I had a chance to kind of give it a shot and see if it even resonated, or if I was any good at it. And so it was a pretty slow ramp. I think, I would say half of 2019 was just that, like trying things out, talking with people about what it might look like. That's also when the website came and all that kind of more kind of tangible, marketing stuff that I at the time thought was foundational to my success. And now and I'm sure you talk with people about this too, because I can see you nodding your head. It's not. My husband told me over and over again, why don't you, and very lovingly, his message though, just to not to sugarcoat it and get straight to the point, was stop marketing and start doing the work. The more you market, the more you're spending time building your website and making sure your messaging points are on, and all the colors and the fonts, and you've hired all these people and done all this stuff to make everything perfect. It's taking away the time that you could be actually doing the work, whether that's free. I mean, at the time it was just free work. I was just trying to figure it out. So anyway, the time was well spent, and I'm glad I didn't go too far, because I'm sure we both know people in this world who just start to use it as a crutch, and then they have a gift. You're not sharing your gift because you're spending all this time building your website, and we need you. Yeah. We need you desperately. The website, I mean, there's so many famous people and successful people who don't have a website, or if they do, it's like a one pager with an email address. Rachel Rodgers, do you know Rachel Rodgers and her podcast?
No.
what is it called? Million dollar. Oh gosh, now I'm going to botch it. Anyway, she's.
I'll find
she's
it. I'll
great.
put it in the show notes. Don't worry.
Great.
And I couldn't agree more. I'm glad you bring it up. One of my friends, Lauren Golden, who I'm hoping will be a guest on the podcast here soon, she founded the Free Mama movement. So she has 3 kids and she wanted to be home with them, but still bring in an income because, she loves to create and produce. And I was listening to something that she had in her Facebook group, and it was something like, a lot of people think they're doing something when they make their website, but you might end up, and I don't know if this is her words or if I also got this from someone else and I'm mushing them together, but you might end up needing to offer something completely different, because unless you've like surveyed people and you've kind of gotten your feet wet and gotten the ball rolling, how do you even know what you're going to offer is something that people want? So you've done all this work, like doing what you think people want, and they might not. So if you're like, no, I have to have a website, like do one that you can easily edit without code and without paying someone to do it for you, because it will change. I've already edited my website like 5 times. So,
oh my God, me too. Me too. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I feel like I've done it even more than that.
Well, you've been in business a little longer than me, so I would expect that. But yeah. So like, tell me about, how did you like ramp up, revenue and getting clients and all of that? What was that process like? Did you, and I guess kind of a sub question to that, did you battle with the imposter syndrome of like, oh my God, like what am I doing? What have I done? I know you said you never looked back, but like, did you have any of those moments?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And again, still on that journey. So, full transparency, human being here, right? However, I feel like I'm getting, I don't know if better is the right word, because that makes it sound like we're not good and now we're better, because imposter syndrome is real and it comes when we least expect it. But I often say that for me, launching and trying to grow a business, being an entrepreneur, the business is me. So like they're inextricably tied. For me to think that there's this thing called Enlivened Studios over here, and then on the left hand, on the right hand, there's this being, Shannon Hughes, is a complete fallacy. They're exactly the same thing. And so, that was hard for me to grapple with. Like I kind of wanted to have this like separation of church and state. And I realized like, oh my God, no. Every move I make to build the business is me growing into myself, is me battling with my inner critic, is me finding out new aspects and new ways of being that I'd never explored before. So to your point about, if you go back to that analogy of building a website, and I did build a website. So, I did the things, but like, how it's like I was, what's that silly thing people say? Like you're driving the car while
oh my gosh, flying the plane or building the plane while it's in flight. I just was using that analogy yesterday. That's too funny. Same page, girl.
Yep, totally. And that's what it is, because here I am, okay, well, I'm going to start building a workshop where, it's a drop-in workshop where once a month I'm going to host it for, 2 hours in a rented yoga studio. Okay. I did that for a while, and I rented this yoga studio for like $60 because my friend owns it. So it was very, reasonably priced, and I would get maybe, I don't know, anywhere between sometimes 12, sometimes 30 people in this workshop. And I was charging them like $20 a head. So not a big moneymaker. But again, the stakes were low, and my imposter syndrome was in there. I didn't know my value, and I wasn't charging people what now I look back and go, oh my God. And it was a learning experience. So I had to go through that. And like every workshop I would come out, like, for example, I remember for a long time, I would come out of these 2-hour workshops. I couldn't string 2 words together because I didn't know how to manage energy, So I would hold space for these people to have these aha moments and sometimes very vulnerable conversations. And I didn't know how to protect my own well-being. So I would leave with everybody's like stuff and trauma and or humor and joy and laughter, like whatever it is. I took it all and I just like put it in a big heavy bag and like threw it over my shoulder and carried it home and then tried to be a mom. So that's just an example of like wait, that's not working. Okay. Like, let's go back and revise the website, right? It's like, how do I build this while I'm experiencing what it is that I need to learn about myself and what I'd like to infuse into what I teach other people?
So let me ask you more about that. Well, first question, are you an empath?
Will you give me your definition of empath? I think so, but I don't really know how to define it.
I don't know if this is an official one, but to me, what it means is people who easily absorb the emotions and the energy of other people. Like they maybe have a harder time compartmentalizing it. Yes, but I don't know that that's the official definition. Okay.
Yep. That's fine. Totally. And that makes a lot of sense. And I'd say yes, but I wouldn't say I'm extreme on that spectrum, but yes. And I consider myself fairly quote, and I'm putting air quotes, intuitive in terms of being able to like read a room and kind of sense how I should be with people in order to make sure they feel safe and comfortable. So yes.
Yes. So you read energy and you also have a high EQ is what I heard you say pretty much. So I'm curious. The more people I meet as I really begin embracing the energy of things, the more that I am finding people have a hard time protecting their energy. And also kind of in parallel, I feel like the most successful entrepreneurs or just people in general are those that are constantly working on themselves. So can you talk to me a little bit about the process of learning how to protect your energy? What does, personal development look like for you and sort of those anecdotes? Because I think that that's a really key piece to everything we're talking about.
Yeah. So I picked up The Artist's Way at the beginning of all this. Have you read The Artist's Way? And
no, but now I'll get it. You've given me other good book recommendations, so I trust that one.
Yeah, it's great. It's an old book. It's written by a woman named Julia Cameron, who is now in her, probably late 80s by now. And it's all about creative renaissance, redefining yourself in terms of your creative resilience and the fact that we're all innate creatives. And I bring this up because she has a series of practices that walk you through a 12-week program. And her key she's got like some very foundational practices that the most of the book is rooted in. And one of those, this is really the only one I want to focus on because that's a whole separate podcast, but is what she calls morning pages. And the practice is every morning before the day starts, before you have responsibility or your spouse needs you or work starts or your kids or whatever, you just write stream of consciousness in a notebook or journal or on whatever you want to, but it's handwriting, right? Because there's something special about how that makes your brain work. And you just stream of consciousness write for 3 pages. And in the context of the book, it's all about kind of like, in doing so, you start to awaken to your own creative prowess. However, what I've really taken it to mean is I now have a morning practice. Every morning I wake up at 5:30. I sneak down here. I try not to wake up the dog or the guinea pig or the kids. And I come into this room here.
I love it.
God, again, separate conversation. Good Lord. Let's just say my 9-year-old's very convincing. I come into this space that I know you can see, Alasia, and I light candles and I play quiet music and I sit in here and I write in my journal and then I meditate and then I let my day begin. And so my morning routine, because I was asked this the other day, like, how do you prep and what, and I thought, I don't know. And I'm realizing like how foundational this is to my own well-being and uncovering parts of who I am and what I'm curious about and what I know and what I don't know, just by the sake of writing it down. So anyway, that's a very long-winded way of saying that my morning routine is huge in me uncovering who I am and bringing that into the work that I do. I would also, I think, say, finding community, like a sisterhood of people that I can just lean on and just be with, who know all the good, the bad, and the ugly, and will be my cheerleader, or the people who just are like, what the fuck are you doing? Like we need those people in our lives to tell us not only all the good things, but also like the questioning what we're up to.
Yeah, no, like personal development, but then also like the energy protection. It sounds like too, your morning ritual probably is part of that, right? Because you're spending time on yourself in the beginning of the day so that you're sort of like shoring up the walls of the fortress, so to speak, by working on yourself so that you aren't so reactive. I shouldn't even say it that way, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, totally. No, thank you for reminding me what the original question was. And yes, the energy, I think it's just, not just, but I think what I've done is I bring it to the forefront of my consciousness now. Like I remember so clearly how those workshops felt when I left, and I don't want to be there again. I mean, there was one day where I came back. The workshops themselves were delightful, but I came back, like I said, I couldn't string two sentences together, et cetera. And without anybody in my family knowing, we have a pool, and I walked up to the pool and I got in the water, and I told my coach that, and she goes, well, yeah, you were quite literally washing washing other people's energy off of your body. Like that was kind of a ritual that I didn't even know I was doing.
Were you in your clothes when you walked in?
No, that would be very
I was picturing you like getting out of the car and just walking into the pool fully clothed. So, okay, never mind.
That sounds, like a white gown and like, like a flower crown. Now I wish it was that dramatic. No, there was definitely a bathing suit and a change of clothes, which maybe demystifies it a little bit.
No, not at all. But that's a good point though, because I do think a lot of us are in, like, especially as a coach, right? Like you're taking on other people's problems and helping them solve them, which is very rewarding. But if you're not careful, you can also internalize that, and you have to keep, your container clean, so to speak. So I think having a ritual is really, that's great. I love that idea.
Yeah, totally. And I just, in closing out that question, there's so much to be said about just moving our body, right? Like, I don't know, go outside, go for a run, play with the dog, stand in the rain, whatever it is, but like get out of whatever the situation or the environment, no matter how beautiful or how fun or how silly, you still have to go from that place to another place. So what does that transition look like? And how can you take care of yourself to go from point A to point B and to unhook from whatever isn't going to serve you throughout the rest of your day? And I guess the last thing I'll say is I'm also really conscious of, like, if I have a workshop, like that's it for me. One, I can't have one and then like 2 hours later do another one. Like it's too much. And I'm sure as a coach, it's the same thing. Like, well, I have to build in buffer time to allow myself to sort of ease into whatever's coming next.
Absolutely. And well, one thing I want to touch on too, I mean, what I'm hearing you say with that is being mindful of your capacity, because I think it's so tempting when you're the one who brings in the income and has to do all the things. Like, it's easy to try to overextend and overdo it, but then you run out of gas and you're not good to anybody. So being super mindful of capacity and making sure to kind of, work in self-care. I was on a podcast yesterday as the guest, and he was talking about really maximizing your activity by doing a primary and a secondary activity at the same time. So the primary is what you're focused on. The secondary, you don't have to pay attention to. So as an example, you need to get in some movement. So you go on a walk and you listen to an audiobook or something while you're doing that. Right. So yeah, I think finding a way of like taking care of yourself while still, I mean, you don't have to be productive all the time either. Let me just say that, but finding a way to practice self-care infused in your business, because otherwise you're going to burn out. And what was the point? Now it's like, you might as well be back in your corporate grind with a steady paycheck.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Amen.
Tell me, what has been your favorite part of entrepreneurship so far? And what's been the biggest challenge or lesson?
I'll start with the biggest challenge because it's always easier because we have negativity bias. So yeah.
Well, we're wired that way so that we wouldn't die, right?
I know.
So it's not your fault. That's why we're like this.
Yep. Come on in, reptilian brain. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is I want to take off. Like, I want this thing. I really believe in this work. And I know I still have a lot to learn. I mean, I told you about the conference that I've been attending all week, and it's illuminating because I see these people, whether they're presenting or having dialogue or chat conversations, like, oh my God, you've been doing this for like decades. And I just want to, drink in every single thing that you have to offer. So I've got a lot to learn, and I'm not introducing that idea because it's a block or something. I'm just saying it because I get so passionate about how important it is to bring and applied improv. That's just a mechanism, but ultimately this is all about self-awareness and listening and, operating as a collective versus an individualistic society. And God, you could just go on and on about the places that you can take this work, despite how if you take applied improv out of it, Alacia, like you and I do the same thing, right? We're just doing it in different ways, but we have a job to do. And so all this is to say that the challenge is like, sometimes I feel like I'm shouting into the wind, like, come on, call me back. This will literally change your life, or at least it'll make an impact or a drop in the bucket for how your organization might shift, or how you might view things a different way. And we can do this together, and by sharing an experience that I can help us create. And so, I mean, if you take all that flowery language out of it, this is business development, right? I want my business to really take off. And I'm still a little unclear about in which way that's going to happen in terms of, revenue generation. And it's like, there's like these little whispers that I get about like retreats and personal development versus corporate. And I don't know. So the challenge is building the plane while I'm flying it, although that is also the joy. And then just, the business development of it, and really just trying to garner some income so that I can feel very comfortable in this and quit having the conversations with myself and with anybody who will listen, who's close to me, about how much I should charge. And, oh my God, that's too much. And I don't know, they didn't call back. It must mean I'm not valuable. Like, I am so tired of that story that I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
I'm just tired of that story.
Yesterday, you know what she calls that? The itty bitty shitty committee, like that internal dialogue you have. Yeah, I know. I'm like, I'm going to use that. And to your point too, I think it's really easy to get caught up in the how. I've been trying to release that more and more, and just knowing that it'll work out like one way or another. I mean, like the TikTok thing being an example, I had a ton of coaching leads come through that. And I had been like praying and meditating on like, getting my message out and finding the people that were going to be right to work with. And then it's like, you just have to keep opening up the channels and not worry about how it's going to happen. But that's easier said than done.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's a practice. I have a beautiful friend named Gurian. And she says, what does she say? And I think she made this up, or she said it came to her sort of in a download. And here it is. If I knew what it looked like, I'd miss what it is.
Oh, I love that.
I just love that, because the more you go, well, it's a box. It's a box. It's a box. It's a blue box, and that's all it's ever going to be. And so here it is. Where's the blue box? Like, it's not, well, meanwhile, you're getting a shoulder tap that it's not a blue box at all. It's something completely different. It's bigger. It's round. It's a different color. It moves, whatever it is. But if we're so focused on the fucking box, we're going to miss all the other things that it possibly is. And so what are those opportunities, and how might we stay open and aware enough to see them and listen to them and get curious to figure out, oh my God, it's not this thing at all. It's whatever. I mean, talk to me in 2 years and I might be living in freaking Bali, like leading retreats on creative writing. I don't know. So right. I love that. I love that. Like, if I knew what it looked like, I'd miss what it is.
It's so true, because the thing I've noticed is that, I mean, I believe that the universe works in really mysterious ways. And if we're open to it, I mean, pretty much every time without exception, it's going to show up in a way that we did not expect. Like, just as an example, I had sworn off dating because I was like a string of bad relationships. And I was like, I'm just going to focus on myself. I'm not dating for a while. And then when I'm ready, I pray that the right man will come into my life. So 2 weeks later, I'm at a 4th of July party with my guy friends. I was the only girl there. And they were like, we know you're not dating. We respect that. But can you please just download Tinder? Because we want to see what our competition looks like. Because they were all on it. So I'm like, okay, fine. And then guess where I met my husband 3 days later was on Tinder. So you stay open and just enjoy. I think God, the universe, like, such a great sense of humor. So just enjoy the ride. What about, okay, so what about the best part? Like, what has been your happiest moment or the thing you're most proud of since starting your business?
Put simply, I'm just really proud of creating something out of nothing. I mean, there didn't used to be this business, and now there is. There didn't used to be a body of work that there didn't used to be this body of work, facilitated in this way. And now there is. Like, that's crazy to me. So I think that's kind of a short answer. And I guess what goes into that is I'm really proud of my perseverance, and I'm proud of continuing to see this as a creative act. This is an act of creativity. Right now, you and I co-creating this thing, we didn't plan this. This is improvised. We are new friends. We found each other, on social media because we just said yes and leaned into it. To me, that's creativity at its fullest. And we're making something right now, right?
And that's our innate nature, right? Like, so many people get cut off from that because our culture values masculine energy so much. It's all about the doing and the achievement and all of that. The creative is a feminine energy, and they should be in balance, right? So yeah, I'm with you. I think getting back into that creative flow has been rejuvenating. Like you said earlier, the soul sucking thing. And like, that's exactly how I describe it. It's not that, I was doing anything that was bad. It just wasn't what my soul was called to do. And so if you're not in alignment, it does feel like your soul is getting sucked out,
It does. It does. It does. And that's what's so fun about the work that we do, we being you and I, but also the collective we of your listeners and whomever else that is doing creative work, is modeling what's possible. Like this is possible. We still have responsibilities. We still have financial problems. Like my kids are still XYZ and the guinea pig is sick, whatever. Like these things happen. And yet, I still wake up and I write my morning pages, or I still wake up and I put the 75 cents into the jar. Like it's a practice. And yeah, there's power in that. There's power in that.
So we all have so much more power than we realize. And I think, you'd said something earlier that we're counting on you. Like if you're hearing this and you're not doing what your soul is called to, we're counting on you to start. Like I say this a lot that, the odds of you being here, it's like a 1 in 400 trillion of you, uniquely you being alive at this moment. It's not an accident. Like that's a true miracle. So now you got to figure out what you're here to do and then go do it. Right. Like we need it. We all need it.
It goes back to that Howard Thurman quote.
Yes. Yeah. Wait, can you say it one more time? That would be the perfect note to end this interview on before we jump into the business tip that's going to drop tomorrow.
Yes. So the Howard Thurman quote, and for those who don't know who Howard Thurman is, he is a theologian and a spiritual teacher, an author, and a meditator who lived in the early 1900s. He's a Black man, and he was way ahead of his time in terms of some of the wisdom that he espoused, and the meditation practice too. Granted, that goes way back to ancient times, but at least here in America. And he said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive."
God, that's so beautiful. I feel like I've come alive in the last 3 months, and I'm so grateful for it. Ups, downs, all of it. It sounds like you're feeling that way too. It's like the good, the bad, all of it is just, it's invigorating. So yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to record our business tip episode. Tell our listeners a little bit what you're going to share with them and how they can apply it to their life and business or in entrepreneurship.
Okay. So Enlivened Studios is my practice. And I say that I'm an experiential facilitator who I root my work in improv and play and writing and immersive experiences to bolster communication, collaboration, and to really invite people to kind of flex and practice our yes and mindset. Because if we can lean into one another with curiosity versus advice giving, right? We can, this might sound crazy, but I believe it. We can change the world. We can change the world. Yeah. So I do this in private and public sectors. I do this in small to medium-sized teams. I just did a sales kickoff in July for a group of 50 people in a real live room, which was amazing.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Yeah. And I also do, and this might be interesting to your listeners, is I do a monthly drop-in that is currently 90 minutes. I'm probably going to make it 2 hours. And every month we have a theme. I call them my Enliven Up sessions. And 99.9% of the people or the time that I hold these sessions, women or women identified folks show up, which is empowering in its own right. But that does not mean that men are, not allowed or shouldn't come, because it's very important for us to have these conversations cross-gender as well. But we just get in the Zoom room today. Tomorrow it might be live, who knows? But we get in a room together and we play a little bit. We usually do some writing. We play some music. We might do a little bit of movement, and the themes vary. So it might be, I did a whole session around getting to know your inner critic and showing gratitude for your inner critic, because she's not always bad. Or one around creative resilience. Or at the end of the year, I did one around planning and what that might look like to make your dreams come true. But I did it through the framework of storytelling. So everything is very kind of whimsical and playful. But at the end of it, you kind of go, oh my God, I actually learned something and I created something in community with other people. So yeah, my work takes lots of different shapes and kind of looks different through different lenses and different communities. And I'm just obviously very passionate about it. And thank you for having me and allowing me to kind of give a little bit more information about Enlivened Studios.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure. I'm excited to dive in deeper too for the business tip. And tell us too, before we sign off, where can people find and connect with you? And I'll include all of these in the show notes for ease of access.
Thank you. So enlivenedstudios.com. So there's an ED at the end, Enlivened. On LinkedIn is kind of my hangout, and I'm Shannon Dean Hughes. So it sounds like that'll be in the show notes because that's my middle name is in there. I'm also on Instagram. And I do have a download that might be interesting, for any facilitators or folks that hold space for other people, whether you be coaches or teachers or trainers. And that's at enlivenedstudios.com/download. And that is, it's a PDF that I created that's beautiful and filled with all sorts of great information, but it's called Tips and Tricks to Enliven Up Your Virtual Gatherings. So, I introduce a couple of improv games in there and give a little context on, best practices for holding space, for transformation.
Oh, that's great. I mean, everyone's virtual now in some capacity, so very timely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to have another episode with you that'll drop tomorrow. And I can't wait to hopefully meet you in person someday.
Me too. We're not too far away from each other, so it's not too far off. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. Did you know we're in the midst of the Great Resignation? 4.3 million Americans left their jobs in August without seeking a new one. If you want to become a corporate dropout like me, but you need help creating an exit plan, I can help. Whether you need corporate exit coaching, business coaching, or you're seeking help to step into the best version of yourself, I'd love to connect with you. Listeners of the Corporate Dropout podcast can book a complimentary discovery call with me. Visit alessiacitro.com/dropout. That's ALESSIACITRO.com/dropout to book your free coaching call today. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If today's episode added value to your life in some way, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share it with someone who needs this. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram and hear how the show has inspired you. So tag me or slide into the DMs. Find me at Corporate Dropout Official or Alessia Citro. That's ALESSIACITRO and 2 underscores. Until next time, remember that you're a badass. Stay focused, stay hungry, and dare to drop out.